Others are on mute.
Hello, and welcome to our online Parent Council meeting. I'm Sarah Scott, and I'm the new chair of Gillespies Parent Council. Thank you for joining us this evening. Apologies in advance for any technical issues that we might have if you're having problems joining us or hearing us, or if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your patience. We're using MS Teams because it's a system approved by Edinburgh Council, but it doesn't allow us to be as interactive as some other systems. The only people who can be heard are the presenters. Everyone else attending can write questions via the Q&A panel, but they can't be heard. I'd like to go through a few things briefly before we start. We're aiming for the meeting to last about an hour. The meeting is being recorded and it will be put online for those who can't make it, and brief minutes will be taken as they normally are at a Parent Council meeting. Bearing that in mind, please don't share personal information, in particular about your children, that shouldn't be shared publicly. This evening we'll have presentations from our head teacher, Donald MacDonald, along with members of his senior team, Laura Stewart, Ben Lewis and Kate Pearce, we hope, if she can attend. Then there will be a Q&A session which Donald will lead, but he'll be able to draw on the expertise of his team. As I said, we can only take questions via the Q&A panel, and the mics won't work for anyone other than the presenters. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderator, so if you would like your question to say private, please say so when you type it in. Can I ask that if you see a question on the Q&A panel that is similar to one that you want to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat question? That will hopefully let us get through more questions and let our presenters concentrate on the most popular ones. Before handing over to Donald, here are some other issues I'd like to bring to your attention. The most recent Edinburgh Council-led locality meetings with Parent Council representatives from across the city took place at the beginning of November. On this occasion, this covered an update on SQA assessment plans and a presentation on learning assessment and assessment. The slides and the minutes of the meeting are on our website, which can be found through the Parents section of the school website. Just to summarise some of the things that came up, the SQA presentation was given by Darren McKinnon, Quality Improvement Manager. It was confirmed that NAT5 assessments will be based on teacher judgment, supported by resources and quality assessment provided by the SQA. However, it is still not clear exactly what that will comprise. The Council understands that 3 to 5 pieces of evidence will be used in the assessment, the number depending on the subject, and work is still ongoing on capturing performance for subjects such as music, PE and drama. Higher and advanced higher exams are still planned to go forward in May and June, but the SQA will take its final decision on whether exams can go ahead at a review in February, taking into account the state of the pandemic at that time. The Council has set up a Closing the Gap task force made up of teachers from different educational areas as a resource to support children who have lost learning during lockdown, those who are self-isolating and those who may require more support, and they will be deployed on a school cluster basis. The SQA is still issuing guidance through November, meaning that schools' planning on assessment is still ongoing. We know that parents and children are anxious to have some clarity on this important issue, and the Parent Council plans to hold a further meeting this year in December to allow the school to update parents on plans with the benefit of all the SQA guidance, and we will confirm the date of this meeting as soon as possible. You will perhaps have seen a letter circulated by the school today that the Council is currently consulting on its revenue budget, where it is planning to manage a deficit of about £47 million over 3 years. This consultation is also signposted on the Parent Council website on the news page. This is an opportunity for parents and others to highlight the importance of maintaining education spending in this time of upheaval for schools and children and into the future, and I would urge you all to take part in it if you can. The Council are also running an informal consultation on plans for Gaelic medium secondary education, and again there is a link on the Parent Council website. There are ongoing efforts by parents to lobby the Council for the reinstatement of extracurricular activities where these are volunteer or parent-led. The Education, Children and Families Committee passed a resolution before the October holidays to restart after-school sports on a rolling basis after the October holidays. However, it remains the case that the Council do not currently permit individuals other than Council staff to lead extracurricular activities. This issue is being considered again at the full council meeting tomorrow, so we await what happens then. Finally, I come to financial issues. The Parent Council Constitution indicates that we should give an update on our finances to all our meetings. So on behalf of Ros Ingle, our Treasurer, I can report that since the school restarted, we have income of £195, which relates to last year's refreshment stalls, £46.45 from Easy Fundraising, and £1,200 from the Council as the annual grant made to all parent councils to help with running costs. Our current bank balance is £3,677.02. The money that the Parent Council raises from events, when it was possible to run them, and through easy fundraising and donations via Parent Pay is all used to support the school in a number of different ways, identified by school staff as part of our small sum scheme. Some of the things that Parent Council has supported recently include play therapy resources, support for the Pupil Equity Fund for help for children who fall just out with its criteria, and resources for the STEM Club, amongst many other things. However, every year requests for financial support for worthwhile projects have to go unanswered as the Parent Council does not have sufficient funds to cover them. Our income was down in 2019-20 due to COVID restrictions on running events, and this year is likely to be affected in just the same way. We know that this is a difficult time for many families. However, for those that are in a position to do so, we would ask you to consider supporting our fundraising this year. One way this can be done is using easy fundraising in your online shopping. This is a way of raising money at no cost to yourself, and there are details on the Parent Council website opening page for further information. For those who are able to provide any further support, this can be done by donating via the permanent link on Parent Pay. Thanks for your time listening to that summary. Just before handing over to Donald, I'd like once again to thank him and all the staff at our school for everything they have done and are doing to keep the school open and to keep the school community safe. These are not easy times, and their dedication and professionalism is much appreciated. So thank you, and now I'm going to hand over to Donald for his update. Thank you, Donald.
Let me start again. I've fallen into the trap of not having my microphone on, so I hope now that you can hear me. I'm getting a thumbs up. Can people hear me? I'm just looking at my panel. Thumbs up. Okay, let me start again. Thank you, Sarah, for giving the overview for the evening, and thank you to the Parent Council for organising tonight's event. We have a busy agenda, and I'm grateful to colleagues for contributing to this this evening. So tonight we'll spend a bit of time on what we are doing to develop our practices in relation to anti-bullying, and also what we're doing in relation to meeting the challenges around rising roles. One of the positives from this current pandemic is that we have become more skilled in our use of technology. A good example of that is tonight, where on such a dreich sort of Scottish evening, so many may not have been tempted to have attended the meeting if it was held in our library. So instead, more people, I hope, are here tonight and the opportunity to interact in a different way. A few things I want to just mention in my overview. First of all, something that dominates my daily practice, my weekly practice, and that is COVID management. And that's keeping youngsters and staff safe. I think we're doing a good job there. When we set off on this journey in the middle of August, all the pupils being back, all the staff being back, there was enormous apprehension and anxiety about how things would pan out. So over those 14 or 15 weeks, I can confirm that we've had 6 positive cases amongst pupils and 1 member of staff. I believe that none of these cases are related, so I believe that transmission was off the campus. To help us manage the school, just to recap on some of the things that we do, we have a one-way system at busy times, for example, class changeover times, wearing of masks in many areas, including now in senior classes. Ventilation of rooms we know is key. Disinfecting of work surfaces, and all are encouraged to socially distance. So those practices then have evolved over time. In particular, the wearing of masks is now expected of all seniors, 4, 5 and 6, and staff in more senior classes. So that's in response to the advice and the guidelines that come from government. Overall, then, I'm pleased with how we are managing the situation. One never knows what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after, but rest assured that we apply the latest government and NHS advice when it comes to contacting those who have been in contact with a positive case. And when those youngsters are in self-isolation, they're expected to go on with their school work, accessing that work via Teams. And I do want to acknowledge at this point that the provision of work for youngsters on Teams hasn't been as good and as thorough as we'd wish it to be. It's been a bit patchy. We notice that and acknowledge that. But I'm hoping that changes that we're making as that evolves will improve if your youngster is going to be involved as one of those who's self-isolating. I welcome Holly Gordon to our team, who now coordinates the work in relation to supporting youngsters who are self-isolating. Prior to tonight, then, a number of parents did contact me via the Parent Council with a number of things they wanted me to comment on. Let me just go through some of these in no particular order. First of all, in relation to SQA assessments, and Sarah touched on that earlier. As you'll know, National 5 awards next year are to be based on teacher judgments and teacher awards, whilst higher and advanced higher, currently it is planned that they will have a traditional examination. A final decision will be made on those towards the end of February by the Scottish Government, in particular the Deputy First Minister, Mr. John Swinney. Parents obviously were very keen as our pupils to find out how we will go about awarding grades, first of all, in terms of National 5. I can confirm with you that we do not as yet have all the information that we need to do that. I was at a meeting earlier today with Deputy First Minister, and we asked the question of when we would have that information. He was confident we would have it by the end of this week. That will allow us then as a school to take that information, to analyse it, to process it, and to find the best way ahead for us as a school. Every school is different, our contexts are different, and I'm aware that schools have got different arrangements in place. I would much prefer to go to parents and pupils with a set of arrangements that are unlikely to change once we set them out. Now, that simply is not possible at the moment, but we are confident that we will have that set of arrangements and assessment schedule for you at the beginning of December. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, there'll be a further Parent Council meeting in the first half of December, which will be specifically focused on SQA arrangements. And we will have a detailed plan for you then. In advance of that, some of the things that we're thinking about, for example, prelim arrangements, just to share with you some of the issues we have around that. Whilst there is no formal final exam for National 5 pupils, my thinking at the moment is that we should have prelims for National 5, in order to generate more robust evidence, but also to give them experience of a more formal exam setting. Because if we don't do that, the first opportunity they would have to sit exams would be prelims at higher, or indeed the higher exams themselves, should the COVID conditions and restrictions continue. These are some of the issues that we're discussing and thinking about. There is related to that a challenge for us in that if we are running exams with large numbers of pupils, first of all, in order to release the rooms to do that, we would need to have exam leave for pupils at home. That would run counter to maximising the time that we have pupils in front of us in classes. So it's one of the tensions that we're thinking about. Higher and advanced hires, we will certainly have to have prelims for them. And current thinking is that they would be towards the end of January, beginning of February. But those dates to be finalised when we know more about what the SQA deadlines are. A few other things I just want to mention very, very briefly. Parents have been asking about coursing evenings. That's for S2 going into S3. Excuse me. We will have that, we anticipate, towards the end of January. And similarly for S4 going into S5 and S5 into S6, we would anticipate also going towards the end of January for that. And we'll give you as much notice as possible of the specific date. We haven't confirmed a P7 open night as yet. It's much later than normal, but that will certainly be online and presented in a different way to what would normally be a visit. I'm pleased to share with you that the school continues to be very popular. The numbers currently transferring to James Gillespies in August 2021 will be in the order of 316. When we consider that the school was originally built for an intake of 200, you can see that that does present challenges, but also opportunities for us in that we benefit from getting more staff in and potentially broadening the subject base that we offer. On a lighter note, Christmas events, we will not be having our Christmas concert this year at the Ish Hall, which is normally a huge event, but we are hoping to have some kind of Christmas event online, and the music department, performing arts department are busy getting ideas together for that, so more on that to come. I've had some questions in relation to extracurricular. In terms of PE, PE activities largely continue to be embargoed by the council, but I'm hoping that that will loosen in the coming weeks and we can see more of a return to the extracurricular programme that is quite strong and diverse here at Gillespies. Questions in relation to music. I'm pleased that most instructors are now back in school and pupil engagement has been very good. So where face-to-face practical lessons are available, staff and pupils are really happy to be back. Some instructors have changed the day which they attend Gillespies in order for us to maximise the use of practice rooms and to allow our senior classes adequate access for their practical classes. Excuse me. Woodwind, brass and voice continue to have flipped learning where pupils record videos and discuss these with their teacher during face-to-face lessons. Some pupils are not attending for their feedback, so we're hoping to see a bit more engagement there to maximise the impact of the staff who are with us. So the instrumental music staff have been provided with iPads. We've got news of that today, and they'll be offering online lessons as soon as we get that set up. So that's going to be happening imminently. We will continue to give priority to pupils in S4 to S6 for their SQA work, and then S3. Where capacity allows, instructors are beginning to see the remaining pupils on their timetables, although this may not be every week. We still don't have information about auditioning for a new S1 pupil, so apologies for that. We would prefer to have got started much sooner with them to continue the momentum and the enthusiasm they no doubt will have built up through their primary years. So those in S1 who were learning in P7 should have transferred across and have been contacted by instructors by email at least at this stage. I'm pleased also to say that the pipe band lessons are now back on campus, albeit at a slightly reduced capacity given COVID restrictions. So a positive picture in terms of music coming back on stream, and PE, although we now have full PE indoors with certain restrictions, our PE extracurricular, I'm hoping will continue to come more online, or I should say more happening more in the coming weeks as we learn more and more about transmission of the virus and ways of mitigating it. So by way of summary, that's where I'm at. Just suffice to say that we are fully staffed at the moment. We're missing a few staff. These are mainly due, in fact, to staff whose children are self-isolating from other schools. Overall, that suggests that I can see that staff absence appears to be lower than other times of year. Perhaps the wearing of masks and disinfecting is reducing the seasonally transmitted flus and colds that would normally prevail in a high school at this time of year. So that is a summary from me, and I'll be happy to take questions in the Q&A section later on. So at this stage, I'm going to go on to a main item on the agenda, and that's to say a little bit about the contingency planning for James Gillespies High School from August 2021. That's August 2021 next year. So I'd invite Graham, if you could put the first slide onto the screen so we can share with you as listeners this evening. Okay, I'm hoping that you're able to see that. So this is entitled, James, we just go back a slide, Graham. Thank you. Entitled James Gillespies High School Contingency Planning 2021-22. So a little bit of context to that, if I may, and this is where the second slide comes in, Graham, if you may, if you would move that ahead. So a bit of background then, that the James Gillespies High School role continues to grow, as I mentioned earlier. Our current school capacity is 1,450. That includes the temporary units, of which there were 5 classrooms and a staff centre, the temporary units to the rear adjacent to the Children First building. In August 2021, the school roll is projected to be approximately 1,550. And I would also add, as you can see, the 4th point on the slide, the council has invested £10 million in the redevelopment of Darragh as an annex for James Gillespies High School. Now, the annex that was to have been ready in August 2021. However, I did learn when we came back soon after the summer that the Darragh annex is not going to be ready then. I have to say I was enormously concerned when I heard that, because clearly then we were looking at, gosh, what are we going to do? We've got all these children coming, where are we going to teach them? We did explore options such as building other temporary units, looking at getting other accommodation, but as my colleague Laura Stewart is going to follow me shortly, she'll mention there were challenges around that simply we were not going to be able to get separate accommodation. Should also add to the context here, a new separate Gaelic medium secondary school is being developed, and the council has given approval for a new school to be built. I don't have a definite date for that school becoming operational, but I would estimate 2025, August is my best guess at the moment. Should also add that our numbers continue to grow, and even when the Gaelic medium youngsters do transfer to a Gaelic medium school, we will still be beyond the capacity of the current campus, such as the popularity of the high school, but also for a whole range of reasons, the numbers of eligible children to join the school living in our catchment area has continued to grow and has outstripped projections of some 10, 12 years ago when the high school, the new high school, was being designed and developed. 6th bullet point there, then, due to the impact of COVID-19, completion of Darragh is delayed until the spring of 2022. So additional classroom accommodation will not be possible prior to August 2022. That should say, let me just check that. Additional classroom accommodation will not be possible prior to August 2021. So we'll have additional accommodation really available to us from the spring of 2022, which really in practice will mean it will be the change of timetable from June 2022. So then, everybody, we have a major headache as to what we're going to do. So along with Laura Stewart, who has been seconded to support the development of options moving into this next phase, Jeff Wardner, timetabler, and officers of the council, we have come up with various options, and we have, I think, settled on one, or rather one, which is a main way of delivering, we think will meet the needs of James Gillespies for the session 2021-22, when we will have a shortage of classrooms. So next slide, Graham, if I may. Just to summarise then very, very quickly to put it in context. So we have insufficient classrooms for August 2021, and we do have to find creative solutions that, one, and this is something I'm determined about, that we will maintain curriculum choice. Secondly, that we will maintain and improve current standards for learning and teaching and our attainment outcomes. Thirdly, that we'll continue to improve and develop as a school. And fourthly, we deliver Scottish Government and City of Edinburgh Council targets, which are ambitious, and they are based on continuing to raise attainment for all of our pupils, and also reducing the poverty-related attainment gap, which is a national priority for all of us, something that we put energy and effort into at James Gillespies. So I've given a context then for what the challenge is, and I'm now going to invite my colleague Laura Stewart, who is an acting deputy head teacher, to take you through a bit more detail of what our plans are and where we're going to go next. And there'll be opportunity following this presentation, and indeed beyond tonight, to raise questions and queries with us so we can respond to these and, I hope, develop what is the best possible contingency plan in order to take Gillespies forward from August next year. So over to Laura, please, if I may.
Thank you. So if we could go on to the next slide, please, Graham. So we considered quite a lot of factors when looking at this. And the first one you can see was maintaining or reducing current breadth of courses. Fortunately, as a large secondary school, we're able to offer a broad range of subjects and courses, and we're going to continue to do this in exactly the same way next year. Maintaining this is vital to allow continuation of progression pathways in subsequent years and ensure smaller departments and faculties are protected in relation to the subjects they can offer and their staffing. So this is why reducing our breadth of courses is not an option for us. And the second one, which you can see, is about adapting spaces on site. We've made good use of existing space on the main campus already and have created some really useful and effective additional learning spaces. This is something we'll continue to develop, and we're looking at setting up study zones which could host small group tutoring sessions and free up classrooms for larger sets on the timetable. And the third one, neighbourhood school arrangements. We work closely with our neighbourhood schools to help us reduce pressure points, and we'll continue to do this to ensure that we maintain our current range of courses offered. Multi-use classrooms is number 4, and we have certain classrooms in the school specifically kitted out for certain subjects such as art, computing, food and health technology and science. These classrooms can be used as normal classroom space, increasing our capacity with small adjustments and careful planning. And we'll be doing that more next year. We already do it a little bit this year as well. Number 5, a digital drive and hub development. So for this, we appreciate how vital digital and independent learning skills are for our students to help them prepare for life after secondary school. And whether it be further education or work, we appreciate also it can be challenging for students to build on these skills. There may be barriers such as a lack of device or a lack of a quiet space to work. And therefore, we've looked into increasing device support and investigating some form of hub space, primarily for S6, to be able to study. The next one, number 6, looks at the number of periods currently used for senior courses and how these periods are used. And it links into something called flexible digital learning, which I'm going to talk about for a couple of the slides that come up. But basically, the number of periods allocated for senior school courses can vary significantly between schools and also within schools. And it depends heavily upon subject uptake by students, how many students choose a subject, and also the content of the courses. The teaching strategies used for these periods in senior school can equally vary depending on the requirements of subjects, but they usually involve, especially advanced higher, a more independent learning skills and an increased need for digital literacy as a result of things like advanced higher investigations and research assignments. So this has led us to investigating flexible digital learning in more detail. And the 7th point on the slide, I've kind of touched upon in number 5 already, which is that independent learning skills, especially for the S6, are so important for them to be able to succeed in their senior school courses, but also in their future pathways. And if we could go on to the next slide, please. So flexible digital learning, what exactly is this? It arose from the drive to strengthen students' digital skills and their independent learning skills in preparation for, as I say, life after school. The first part says what's the normal period allocation for senior school courses. So for higher, it's 5 periods, and advanced higher, it's often 5 periods as well, each period being about an hour. And it's usually allocated as classroom-based time. However, as number 2 says, when uptake is low, especially again at advanced higher, the number of periods allocated of classroom time is often reduced, commonly to about 3 periods. This is seen very often in smaller schools, but also in small departments in bigger schools where the uptake can be low. And the third one, talking about delivery styles in different subjects during these periods. Well, depending on the subject, some of these may include things like practical activities or group work, which obviously rely heavily on classroom space. Sometimes it's internet research, which requires digital resources. Teachers book out computer spaces or book the computers to be delivered on trolleys. But the classroom itself is not so essential for those type of modes of delivery. There's also independent study where things such as past paper questions are used with teacher feedback to strengthen exam technique and allow assessment of student ability in applying their knowledge. Students need space to think, and often ICT as resources such as past paper questions are easily found online, as well as mark schemes. There's also project-based work, which is often led by students independently, such as the advanced higher investigations, where they have to drive them forward themselves with teacher feedback at key stages. And teacher-led sessions for tricky content, where a classroom is often very beneficial. So you can see that's just a small selection of some of the delivery styles that teachers use. But what are the advantages then of flexible digital learning? So number 4, and what would it mean for us? So you can see, depending on the activity that the teacher is trying to deliver, there are different ways to provide this. For example, flexible digital learning might mean an advanced higher course delivered in 3 periods of classroom-based time with 2 periods of independent digital learning, however, with teacher time allocated to support with this. It's important to note it's not the same as reducing the period allocation due to low uptake, as the teacher does have protected time to provide additional support during flexible digital learning. Advantages of this is it can give time for students to work independently through tasks with access to digital resources and work at their own pace. It gives opportunities for targeted support for students, again, during these time slots, as well as feedback, because the teacher will have this non-classroom based time protected for support, teaching, feedback, mentoring of small groups. And it provides opportunities for digital and independent study skills to be additionally strengthened. So you might then be thinking about number 5, which is, why haven't we done it before if it sounds so promising? And for this one, there's a few key reasons, to be honest, of why we haven't. One is we haven't had the digital resources to support this equitably across the school before. Every pupil would need a good, reliable device with the necessary programs already uploaded to support flexible digital learning and enhance their teaching and learning in class too. We also haven't had time, teacher time, to properly investigate the development and adaptation of current resources, which would need to be written to our courses as we develop them. And also the confidence in digital skills and the knowledge of delivery modes possible via platforms such as Teams was not consistent with all staff and students. Many online support systems were used in the past, which could have been confusing for students. Many different online support systems. However, we did learn a lot from lockdown. Staff and students can tap into these new strengthened digital skills, and platforms such as Teams are an effective way forward. Confidence has grown in the ability to record video lessons, adapt, share resources, give assignments and assessments online has become more commonplace. Effective ways to give online feedback are now more, teachers are now more aware of these. And we also have time to further develop this year in preparation for the new timetable in June 2021. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So opportunities. So the first one, this situation has made it possible for us to seek support to provide devices to all S5 and S6 students and staff. This has a huge benefit for equity across the school, because with all pupils having the same device, with the same systems, with tech support on site, makes it easier to then train staff and students into the use of these. It also means it's more easy to use them in class, as they're all on the same programs with the same apps and systems. Peers can help one another, and staff and students can learn from one another, all working on the same type of device. The second one links into senior students being better prepared for independent learning through the use of IT. And again, these skills are essential after they leave school, regardless of which pathway they follow. And then the third one, FDL opens up opportunities, because challenges will arise for some students for whatever reason, but we can identify these by tracking and monitoring their engagement online using things like insights on Teams. We can then see issues in progress which become evident and target support during flexible digital learning time, which is something which is more tricky to do, individualized support when you have a full class in a classroom at the same time. Can we have the next slide, please? So how will we ensure that we maintain and improve on current high standards? So the first point, we've already held discussions with staff to analyse how best to use flexible digital learning time, identifying areas well suited to this delivery mode within courses. And the second point, opportunities for sharing best practice between staff will be built in and training provided as required. The third point, which is reflecting and learning about what worked well during lockdown, I've touched upon already. We have learned a lot from that. One example was the importance of feedback on work completed online or during FDL time. And that feedback time is built in to any non-classroom based periods, as well as a close monitoring of student engagement. So that's just, well, two examples of things that would be taken from our previous experience. Number 4, development time is essential, and it will be provided to staff between now and June, protected to help them discuss and develop the best strategies to use for flexible digital learning in their advanced higher courses. The rationale behind these decisions would be collated and shared with students and with staff and with parents. And then number 5, obviously students are essential as this process. We need to involve them in the planning stages between now and June in gathering vital feedback throughout as well, because obviously they will be key driving it forward and involved. And then slide 8, please, which is our last one. For this one, regarding council support and engagement, as Donald mentioned at the start, we've looked at a number of approaches, and we've looked at the advantages and disadvantages of each one. During this process, flexible digital learning stood out as a great opportunity to be able to move something positive forward, which wouldn't have been possible otherwise. That links into the second point, which is strong council backing and engagement in developing this digital approach. They're making it possible for us to drive forward the digital side of things and giving us time as well to properly develop supporting resources in advance. And the last point, I realise there is a lot to digest in what I have just said, and we've had time to think all this through and get to where we've got now. And I appreciate that you all may need time as well. It's a lot to take in. I'm very happy to answer questions if you have any, but also obviously at a later stage, because they'll probably come to you as you think this all through more. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Laura. Donald, do you want to add anything else at the moment?
Nothing at the moment. I see there's quite a number of questions coming into the Q&A, and I'll respond to these. And I just wonder whether at this point we give people the opportunity to augment as they wish into the Q&A, and we invite Ben to do the presentation on the anti-bullying policy that's emerging, and then we come back to the Q&A at the end. Does that sound like a plan, Sarah?
Yes, that sounds like a good plan.
Good evening, everyone. Just while we are waiting for the slides to come up, just to say that I'm here to talk to you about our anti-bullying policy review, in which I'll lay out where we are in the development process, and at the end I'll talk about how those of you who wish can become involved. Before I start as well, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Kate Pearce. She can't be here this evening, but she has been conducting an important part of the policy review, and she's also been supporting me in this aspect of my remit since I transitioned into this new role. Her expertise has been a massive help to me, so a big thank you to her. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So first, here's the roadmap that we are on. As I just mentioned, Kate Pearce has been leading the review element for some time. That includes reflecting on our previous policy that was implemented 3 years ago, poring over the CEC guidance and documentation that has been incoming, and also going over documentation from Respect Me. And for those of you who don't know, Respect Me are Scotland's anti-bullying service. So we're currently in the consultation phase. For example, we recently met with our police liaison officer to discuss their role and approach, and there'll be more on that later. You may also be aware that there's a pupil survey currently running. As of last night, over 470 pupils, which is about 1/3 of our entire cohort, have responded, which is excellent. And the survey will be open until this coming weekend. And I'll also be talking to you at the end of this presentation about how those of you who wish can be involved in the parent-carer part of the consultation. The next part will be implementation, which would be involve training staff in January, but also raising awareness of the new policy, including the expectations that we all have of each other. Raising awareness is also one way to prevent incidents from occurring in the first place, with another being the education that is provided both by internal and external providers during, for example, PSE lessons. Then the review process will have multiple parts. Firstly, we'll want to conduct surveys with pupils, and that will be comparing the baseline data that we're currently gathering and then seeing how we're improving over time. Second, the Council will continue to release specific guidance documents that will be folded into our policy. For example, there's planned additional documentation on each of the protected characteristics to come over the next months and years. As well as this kind of ongoing review process and absorption of new material, there's also a planned 3-yearly cycle comprehensive review. That's one we're going through now, and that obviously will be happening again in 2023. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just go over a few of the headlines that have appeared in the Council guidance. And the first one I'd like to outline is that the Council say there are 4 R's that are core to our practice. Now, the mathematician in me sees 5 words that begin with R there, but we'll not dwell on that too much for now. So obviously, relationships are key to all practices in education, but I'd like to briefly pick up on the second R, which is rights respecting. That is the language of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And it's important for pupils to know that they do have rights in this. And we have a strong rights respecting school group who will be playing a key part in making sure that the rights, UNCRC rights, are recognised and are within our practice. In addition to that, making sure that we build resilience where needed, and also making sure that all parts of our practice are restorative is also essential. In terms of language, the second bullet point, we want to avoid terms like bully and victim. Calling someone a bully suggests a label that can't be removed. Whereas if we talk about someone exhibiting bullying behaviour or someone experiencing it, suggests that's temporary and can be changed, whereas a word like victim might suggest that's a permanent label. The council definition of bullying can be seen there. I'll give you a moment just to read through that just now. And one part I'd like to focus on there is the idea of agency. And if we combine this idea of agency with right suspecting, then what we're really trying to say here is it's important that the pupil experiencing the bullying behaviour has control where possible on what the outcomes and processes are. We want them to regain their agency when going through the reporting process. The bullying incident has removed their agency, and if they continue to have it removed by us when we're going through an investigation and action phase, then it'll be very likely that they won't be satisfied with the outcome and are less likely to report incidents in the future. The next bullet point on the top right is talking about the difference between what is bullying and what isn't. For example, what might be instead of bullying, where agency hasn't been removed, might instead be conflict. Or, for example, where actually it's not bullying, but something might be considered a crime. And it will be important for us to educate pupils during PSE lessons about the differences there. There's a short paragraph there from Respect Me, which kind of talks about, that there will always be low-level conflict, but we have to make sure that if it does graduate to bullying, that we have actions that we can take in place, as well as supporting pupils in learning about the aspects of conflict and how they can resolve it themselves and with our support. If we could move to the next slide, please. So the general approach there is fairly standard. The disclosure happens, then there's an investigation and the actions are taken, and there's a review. But what we'll be looking to do as part of this overall review is to look at each aspect of this and how we can improve. So we want to make sure that there, disclosures can come in multiple ways so that pupils feel confident they can report incidents, but also make it clear that our mechanisms for parents, staff and witnesses to report. And one aspect of this, the consultation, will be considering how reports might be able to be come in anonymously. The investigation part will usually involve interviewing pupils, staff, where suitable, and documenting that process. But we also want to make sure that we're considering the harm and impact that that has been experienced by the person. And then that means when we come to actions, we are considering the agency that I mentioned earlier, but also making sure that there is a restorative process and that the person experiencing is part of deciding how what form that restorative process will take. And where suitable, there may be consequences which would be detailed in the policy so that pupils are aware of what can and happen. The review stage is really an essential part of making sure that the pupil experiencing has agency, as it is their experience, as it makes sure their experience is reviewed in case further action is required. So we might want to, for example, build in review dates and making sure that they provide feedback on the process so we can make sure they're satisfied with it. If we can go to the next slide, please. So some key considerations, I'm going to outline them in this slide. But for example, if you want to be involved in the parental consultation part, you'll be able to engage in much more detail in this. So one thing to consider, for example, is what might happen if something is alleged or confirmed. So an alleged incident is one that we were not able to independently verify. That you might class that as they said, where you've not been able to independently verify, confirm one person's accuracy over the other. And therefore, what actions would we take in that? We'd want to make sure that, should parents be informed in all cases, or would it just be in some cases? And history would also be considered. So if there are multiple alleged incidents that, maybe there might be the first one, there may be a different type of action taken if there are multiple incidents. The second would be protected characteristics. So in the Equalities Act 2010, there were several protected characteristics. I won't list them all, but ones that may feature more prominently than others in the school setting might be race or sexual orientation or disability, for example. And if those play a part in the bullying behaviour, then they involve an automatic consultation with the police, regardless of whether they're alleged or confirmed, and that would allow the police then to decide what they were going to do next. They will always take a restorative approach in their actions, as would we. And one of the decisions they'd also be making was what happened a hate crime or a hate incident, and that's an action that they would take. And they're kind of going through this, I suppose, this process as well as developing, and that's why it's important for us to consult with them. That was already happened, but to make sure that consultation is ongoing. And finally, on this slide, we have cyberbullying, and there are actions of pupils kind of commenting online. They need to be informed that actually might constitute a crime. So the Section 127 of the Communications Act there just details what is considered a crime if it's grossly offensive, or if it's indecent, obscene, or of a menacing character. For example, some of the S1 classes have already had lessons about online safety and are from the police liaison officer, and that will be continuing. So that's part of the education process. But it's also important to know that and a police liaison officer actually asked me to say this to the Parent Council just now, that if threatening or abusive communications that meet that threshold are being received outside of school, for example, on a weekend, you don't or shouldn't wait until Monday. You should immediately report that to the police using 101. And one other aspect is important. We talked earlier about the person who's experiencing the behaviour. If they are at significant risk, so even if cyberbullying doesn't reach the level of the threshold that I mentioned earlier, that the police might still be consulted if the person experiencing is a significant risk of harm because of that online harassment. But there'll be much more resources available in the final policy about cyberbullying. Go to the next slide, please. So the parental consultation aspect of it is what we're looking to do is we're looking for volunteers to join our parental consultation group. And the first step for this group will be to have an initial discussion next week. So that's Wednesday, the 25th of November from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. If you're interested in that, we'd be sending you just some material, not dozens and documents or the things that would take a long time to read, but just to give you some overview of some of the documents that the council have, for example, that are factoring into our review. And then the second step would be that once we've taken all the consultation and we've drafted a policy, we'd want you to be involved in looking over the aspects of that are front-facing for parents, carers and pupils, and helping us make sure that it meets the standards that would make sure that it will have a positive impact moving forward. So this information I'll also ask Donald to send out in the Friday update, just so it's there as well if people are not able to attend today. And I know it's a short turnaround, but I'll be looking for people to let me know just by the weekend, and then that way I can by the end of the weekend, and that way I can make the arrangements for that meeting to kind of take place online on Teams. If I can just go to the last slide, it did say any questions, but what I'll do is I'll pass back to Donald in a moment. But before I do, again, just want to mention a thank you to Kate Pierce, who cannot be here, for all her support in this. But thank you very much. That's my end of my presentation.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, quite different sets of information that we've shared with you this evening. What I'd now like to do is to go back and pick up some of the questions that are arriving in the Q&A section. So thank you to Kath behind the scenes, who's arranging these for us. Sarah, can I just double check with you? Are we okay to continue till about 10 past 8, quarter past 8? Sarah, is that okay?
Yes, Donald, I think, yes, it's nearly 8 o'clock, and obviously we want to get some of these questions addressed because there are lots of important ones there. But just to reassure people that if their question is not addressed during this evening, then they will be captured and we will get answers put together with the questions, and that will be posted online on the Parent Council website in due course. But yes, I think if we go to maybe 10 past 8, that would probably be long enough just now. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Sarah. So what I'll do then is apply a bit of filtering. If I take the questions that have got 5 or more thumbs up with them. But be reassured that all the other questions we will respond to, as Sarah mentioned, and add responses to these, so they'll be on display on the Parent Council section of the school website in a few days. So the first question relates to psychological support for kids. And someone had commented that CAMS, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service, has a waiting list of around 12 months, at least 12 months. It can be 18 months also. So we recognise that through COVID, etc., there's an increased demand for mental health support for our pupils. Can I bring Ben in at that point? Ben, can you give us just a quick update then on a counsellor who has just joined us in the school?
Yeah, so just to first off say that we welcomed our counsellor to the school this week on Monday. They work with us Monday to Thursday. She's a lovely person, Anna, and she's already kind of meeting with pupils in terms of the assessment process. There'll be more information to pupils, and parents about that process and how pupils can refer. I'm just reading the question, and I noticed that this part of the question says, is there anything that parents could do to support the school in a position to offer psychological support? So if I'm interpreting that right, is that basically, so parents maybe wanting to kind of see if they can support us? What I'd maybe say is that if anyone has a specific query or specific support they can provide, to maybe email me directly, and I can consider sort of each of those kind of supports on a case-by-case basis. But we do appreciate that, and CAMS has always had a long waiting list and is getting even longer. And as always, if you have any specific concerns about your child, you know to get in touch with the pupil support leader, or you can just email the school admin account and they'll pass it to the most appropriate person. And as always, I'll finally say as well, if you feel at any point that you're not, maybe you want to question more about what's already in place, then please just get in touch and we'll always look to support in the best way that we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. So back to me, just going to go through some of the other ones then. Reference to yesterday evening's Parents' Night was online. It's our first time trialling that, and it was with considerable trepidation that we did move into that. By and large, the feedback has been positive. There was a few issues that arose, and the specific question that's been raised there about an assignment visit, putting a gap between calls. We'll take that back and refer it to Bob Shanklin, who is overseeing our parents' evenings, and I'm sure that Bob will be able to provide an answer to that. So we'll be able to respond directly in terms of learning from what happened last night at our next Parents' Nights. And I'm just looking at my schedule in front of me. Next Parents' Nights are due in January. We'll have S2 Parents' Nights in January on the 26th and the 28th of January. Next question is to do with S1 to S3 to wear masks in classes. That question was asked of the First Minister, the Deputy First Minister today, and people may know that we were the first school in the UK to introduce masks for our young people. That was in corridors and communal spaces. As far as classes are concerned, I think that will come our way. I think the evidence and certainly the talk is that we will probably be asking our younger people to be wearing masks in classes soon. But at the moment, government guidelines are that it's 4, 5, and 6, and we'll be staying with that. But watch this space is what I would suggest on that. The next question, it's a long one. I'm going to select out of it's to do with rationale behind the first S4 Parents' Evening being planned for March 2021 after the National 5 prelims or similar tests. And similarly, do S4 not also choose their subjects for hires in advance of this? And parents wanting to meet teachers before the Christmas holidays. So briefly on that, then there's a number of factors that come into play when we're setting out our calendar for a year. First of all, this would normally be done in May and June, with the dates shared with parents by the end of June. And one of the things that I have to take into account is teachers' contracts and also unions' views on this and workload and so on and so forth. That's part of it. But this year is quite different because we weren't really in a position to do much by way of parent evenings before October. So everything has been condensed really into November, December, and the following months. A rationale then for having S4 and S5, S6 Parents' Nights in March were that they would be following the prelims. There'll be a chance to discuss. but also just to reassure you that it would be our plan to have the course choice sheets completed and handed in after that date. Okay, so we will be handing in course choice sheets after that date. So the evening would be a chance to talk about prelim performance, next steps, but also a final opportunity to talk about course choices thereafter. So we have had to turn the calendar to change things around this year in response to changing times around COVID and restrictions. So moving on from there. Prelims, thumbs up from many people that they are very important, and we agree for a whole variety of reasons. Provision of evidence to inform our own grading process, but also to give the pupils experience of an exam hall setting. We think that's important. I agree with the Christmas concert not being able to go ahead this year, and there is some plans, I don't have the details as yet, to do something digital online. So we will share details of that in the next week or two. Teams for parents has arisen as a question. The fact that there are no textbooks makes it extremely hard for us to follow. I share with you, in a sense, a frustration that I have and my colleagues have, that we did have an electronic platform called Show My Homework, which we had been training staff on. Most staff have been trained on this. Just before we went off on lockdown, the plan was to launch in June and have it up and running. We were not able to do that. And the functionality that has would be able to allow parents to go in and have a look at what homework has been issued to pupils. They see the resources and also the deadlines and the dates. The launch of that will be postponed in all likelihood to the summer of next year. So bear with us. In the meantime, we're going to have to use Teams as it is. It's not ideal, because we know that parents don't have access to their children's account. The kids can give access to it. And I just want to see if I'm reading that. I'll give a more fuller answer to that when I consult with colleagues about what access we can give parents and so on and so forth. Private swimming clubs are using Gillespies to provide lessons. That's true. They started on Monday evening, and it is frustrating that we're not able to offer that as yet, given the restrictions that we have. But we will be, and also in terms of after-school clubs, we will be starting after-school clubs in due course. We're currently in Tier 3, as people will know, and that does impact on what also active schools and external clubs can offer. But we are lagging a little bit behind in terms of our extracurricular PE and what is happening then, and we're aware of that anomaly, and we're bound by council policy and guidelines on that. Turning to track and trace, if I may, it's an area I've become quite expert in recent weeks. A question specifically about, do we trace and track friendship groups? Yes, we do. So there are strict criteria that we use, NHS criteria, when a pupil tests positive. It's relatively straightforward for us. Relatively, it's not. You know, we spend a bit of time doing it, and I think we get it pretty much right. We have seating plans which pupils keep to, and we identify who is sitting within 2 meters for more than 15 minutes, and who's face to face, and who's side by side within a meter. Those criteria we do use, and I'm happy to provide those with my Friday update. Beyond the classroom, when youngsters, pupils are out in the playground and also interacting, walking to and from school, we also speak to the pupils involved to trace those contacts. We have a conversation with the pupils concerned. And once or twice we have identified late contacts when other pupils have come forward. So we do that to reassure you. And thus far, in terms of the lower numbers that we do have, whilst most recently we had 8 pupils self-isolating last weekend as a result of a pupil in S3 and a pupil in S5 testing positive, we were able to identify it was just 8. That's quite pleasing. We know of at least one independent school, for example, in Edinburgh, that had 200 pupils isolating as a result of positive cases in their S1 group. I'm pleased that I think we're doing quite well in that area, but who knows what tomorrow and next week holds. A question too in relation to moving students around classes when, for example, a pupil was disruptive. We do that as one of our tiered interventions if a pupil is being disruptive in a class. And yes, it does potentially upset the bubble that we operate by, but it's something that we do map and trace, and were that to lead to other contacts, then that would lead to isolation. But we feel that having settled classrooms with no disruption is really, really important. And allied to that comes the resulting risk that we may be creating an attendant risk by moving a child somewhere else. So we're aware of that risk, and we are mitigating also in that context. Outdoor spaces we do use, would like to use more of, but as the Scottish winter bites in, we'll probably see less of that as time goes on, but we'll continue to use outdoor spaces as best we can. A question about catchment areas and the distribution of is probably one that elected officials will answer better than me. And yes, it is a factor as the school role continues to grow, that there may be a case for relooking at catchment areas for Edinburgh schools, but it's a very contentious area, as we do know with example that proximity to a school, that is the catchment area, is number one determinant for the valuation of a house. So therefore, it's not one I want to go into in any detail this evening, and one I would be asking you to address to elected officials. Research skills, and this is now in response to the question about S6 pupils in advanced hires potentially having fewer periods. So we recognise that research skills are important to learn, but also that S6 pupils are a year group who have had disruption over the course of their senior phase. We recognise that, and that's an area that we're mindful of. And it's one that we'll respond to more fully in the Q&A written responses. So it is one that we have that we are aware of, and we're going to take cognizance of. Flexible digital learning worries me that it's basically less actual teaching. That is true, but in early discussions with our staff so far, we feel and we're confident that we can deliver it without a lowering of attainment, and that's a fairly bold statement to make. Without opportunity to develop that further. Laura, can I bring you in at that point just to respond a bit more fully to that, to give some reassurance that standards of attainment and teaching and learning wouldn't necessarily diminish by having fewer direct teachers and periods in front of a teacher?
So I was just going to add that, having gone round and talked to a lot of departments about FDL, the 5 periods that people currently see advanced higher classes for are not all used for direct teaching. There's a lot of independent work given out during those periods, and a lot of, as I said, research and other work to do with investigations where the pupils go away and actually work on their own on various things. For example, in music, there's a whole period where they all go to practice rooms and aren't seen for that period because they're working independently through some of their pieces. So on a reassuring level, the actual teaching is often delivered within a much shorter than 5 period time frame, the direct teaching. And it's some of the other activities which FDL would be coming into play for. And I know that I touched upon it earlier, but a lot of schools who are smaller give 3 periods to deliver most of their advanced hires because of low uptake, and they don't have this additional protected time to be able to give individualised support or be able to give feedback or resource support online. So we are at such an advantage over some of these other schools because we are going to have the full 5 periods. It's just how we use them to make sure that the time that they are face-to-face in front of us is that direct teaching. So it will reassure you when you see what staff have planned that it's actually very similar to a lot of how they deliver their courses already. And as I say, we've had an awful lot more time to think about it and think through all of these pros and cons, but I really do feel reassured that that won't be an issue.
Thanks, Laura. And some of the others, I'm conscious of the time, I'll just go through some of the others. The very last question that arose was a point from a parent asking for more time at future parent council meetings for Q&A and fewer presentations. And I think that's something we certainly want to take on board, because I think the value of this for parents is the opportunity to interact with us, albeit in this virtual way. And I'm hoping that the next parent council meeting will focus, we'll probably keep it a single item, or so there's a bit more time for the Q&A. Various other bits and pieces, if I may, but reassure you too that we will address all the points and the queries that were raised. I'm going to move down a question, but squeezing more and more pupils into the existing school, and we're losing some of the innovative design features. That's true, and unfortunately it's one of the things that happens when a brand new innovative building that opens up becomes very popular and fills up. Some of you as parents will have had knowledge and experience of that through primary school already. Some of the questions around building design, etc. We're hoping to invite Crawford McGee and Lorna Sweeney from the Centre to a parent council meeting early in the new year to talk about some of the questions specifically related to estates design and how going forward we might learn from some of the projections perhaps that weren't quite as accurate in the past. That's going to be important for Gillespies and other schools also. And I'm just looking through various others. The question again about temporary units could be, is there not time to build temporary units? I'm told the answer to that is no, not in the time available. But again, my colleague at the Centre, Crawford McGee, will be able to answer that. Crawford McGee, yes, got his name right. Crawford McGee, yes. And I'm moving on quickly. Forgive me if I haven't picked up on your question. A question about Gaelic medium medication. When the Gaelic medium moves out, that would create more space. Yes, it will. But also just to add that moving Gaelic medium education pupils out doesn't in itself bring the school back to the capacity that it had before. It does help, but once Gaelic medium education is relocated to its own high school, we'll still be over capacity, and we'll still have to find solutions, which likely will be data based for a good number of years, 10, 15 years to come. And I'm scrolling down. There'll be things that I've missed, so apologies for that. I think I might pause there and would ask perhaps Sarah, if there's anything, Sarah, you'd like me to address specifically tonight, but obviously we'll come back to offering the written answers later.
No, thank you very much for that, Donald. I think you've covered a good range of questions, and as you say, we are going to capture those that weren't answered, and they will be posted on the Parent Council website as soon as we're able to get that put together. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who presented tonight, and thank you a lot for the work that the school is doing in these difficult times. We appreciate that definitive answers to these questions are not always possible given how much things are moving at the moment, but we appreciate that you're doing what you can to keep us informed. So thank you to Donald, Laura and Ben for their presentations, and thank you all to parents for joining us this evening. So as I said at the beginning, our next Parent Council meeting is going to be in December, and that will be an opportunity to update parents on the important issue of exams and assessments, which is one of the issues that came up very clearly this evening. We will have a date for that soon, and we will circulate it to you via the school. And as Donald also mentioned, we will be revisiting the issues raised by Laura in her presentation after this, and particularly in a further meeting, probably in the new year. I've had confirmation from Lorna French, I think her name is now, and Crawford McGee from the council that they will come to speak to us about the background to these decisions and also estates management issues and answer parents' questions. And again, we will let you know when that date has been fixed, but we think it will be in January. So in the meantime, thank you very much everybody for being here. Keep well and bye for now.